Podcast.
Is there anybody out there?
XL Podcast.
XL Podcast.
Facebook, DJ Mallorca Lee.
You're listening to Mallorca Lee's XL Podcast.
Right, welcome to another episode of the XL Podcast. My special guest, DJ Kid, or as his family like to call him, Peter. How you doing, mate?
I'm all right, brother. It's K for knowledge, I for instinct, and D for dedication.
There you go.
That's what somebody came up with that one day, and they said that to me. I said, I've never ever thought about it like that, but I've also heard kid spelt backward describes you best. And that's taken from a film, I don't know if you remember, it's a film called House Party, Kid and Play.
Uh-huh.
It's part because one of them's called Kid, and they're having a kind of like a rhyme and battle thing, and that's what he says, kid spelled backwards describes you best.
Brilliant. Well, listen, with these podcasts, I don't know if you've had the chance to listen to any of them. It's basically just a chat, and I kind of start it like we've spoke about before. It's like from the start to where we are now. So, right. My first question to you would be, when was you aware of music, and when did you first start being genuinely interested in music? It doesn't need to be like right now and then DJ. It could be just a song as a kid you heard. When was you first aware of music?
Yeah, so I was born in 1973 in Edinburgh, and I lived in a place called Gracemount in the High Flats with my mum. And I can't remember if she wasn't really into music that much at the time. We didn't have a record player as such at the time. But my gran and my granddad, who lived close by, they had a stereo. My granddad had a kind of stereo system, and I used to see their records, and I never used to touch it because it was my granddad's system, and it was my granddad was very much mind my furniture. Didn't touch that, whatever. But anyway, when he was out, I used to plug the microphone in and start mucking about with the tapes and everything. But for me, when it really changed was when I got a little Ferguson tape player, a little cassette player that I got for a Christmas. I think I got it in 1978, somewhere like 1978, 1979, something like that. It's a little Ferguson tape player. Now, they were really, really popular back then, but with that tape player, I got, in fact, no, it was about 80, 81, I think, because the albums that I got with it were Adam and the Ants' Final Frontier album, I think it's called, and ABBA's album. I think the album was called Super Trooper. I think that was the name of it. But when I got that cassette player, I can remember vividly going out. Now, me and my mum lived on the 11th floor of these flats. I remember going out with my tape player on Christmas Day and sitting in the stairwell and putting on ABBA's Super Trooper. Now, because the stairwell was like big, massive concrete, 11 floors up, I remember sitting down and playing it and Super Trooper coming on and it reverberating around the whole staircase. And I remember being kind of blown away by the, everybody knows Super Trooper, how it starts. It's got a vocal, Super Trooper. Uh-huh. I remember being like quite taken aback by the sound, and I think sitting in the staircase because it was echoing was.
The reverb right up the stairs would have made it sound.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But that was my first kind of. I think it certainly was my first device that I got, and then not long after that, I got the first Sony Walkman. I can't remember. I actually did a post about that on my Facebook page not long ago, talking about the actual version of it. It was the first Walkman stereo that anybody put out. Sony put it out. It was huge. Mm-hmm. It was a blue portable stereo, and I used to take that about with me all the time. So after that, I kind of got my mum's boyfriend at the time he worked in a record shop in Edinburgh, and he bought us a record player and gave us records. And for me, the first record that I went out and bought in a shop, 7-inch single, was Mike Oldfield, the Blue Peter theme tune. Mm-hmm. I bought that in a 7-inch single, I mean, it's a classic tune. A lot of people actually don't know the old Blue Peter. I mean, a lot of people maybe listening to this will be, what the hell's Blue Peter?
What's Blue Peter? I think it's maybe a porno you made.
So Blue Peter was a children's, what could you call it? Like an afternoon television program that was centred around. They did all different stuff.
Educational entertainment, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah,
like
you learned how to make a Christmas decoration out of coat hangers and tinsel.
Mad stuff. John Noakes climbing up Nelson's column and all that with his safety harnesses.
Right, So they had this theme tune and it was written by Mike Oldfield. So obviously Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells. So from there it was just seemed to be I was always putting records on. That record player that my mum had was one of those ones where you could stack up the 7 inches on the little spindle thing in the middle. So, this was like, pre kind of, I suppose I was queuing them up, seeing how many 7-inch singles I can get into this little spindle thing at the top because, a lot of people maybe don't even know what these are, but you could put a record on and then when that finished, it triggered the spindle, the arm came back and the spindle opened up and the next single dropped down and it played it, automatically. So it was quite a nifty bit of equipment, that. So ultimately those elements between my granddad's system, me getting my little tape deck machine and the Walkman and then that hi-fi, that was my first real introduction to listening to music on a regular basis and playing records.
Your family must have knew you had an interest here. You even feel like the first cassette tape, then it followed up with a Walkman. I mean, probably a lot of people who only run about our ages, like younger listeners, they probably don't understand the impact of the Walkman, especially. Because even like a wee cassette, that was a big deal when you had a wee cassette player in your room with a speaker on it, innit? You keep that in your room or whatever. But then the Walkman, it was like you could take it to school, you could, do what it said, walk about and listen to music. Yeah, and that was like a game changer, wasn't it? I mean, the equivalent of what the the fucking iPod player or whatever,
definitely. Maybe I would put, definitely. It was huge. It was. I know that I looked at the market sales for it. I mean, they were phenomenal. And obviously, quick after that Walkman, there were like loads of big companies jumped on the scene. But that first Sony Walkman, one of the things that I liked about that Sony Walkman was it had this thing. You had 2 ports on it, so 2 people could sit and plug in headphones and listen to the music. It also had this little button on the side. It was an orange button. I can't remember the name of wasn't a talkover, but you could actually cut out the music so you could be listening to it. And I used to remember sort of playing music and kind of chopping it up by pressing this button. Mm-hmm. The headphones, I could press it because it had a microphone on the side of it. So if somebody wanted to talk to you, you could press this orange button and they could talk and it would come through the headphones.
Oh, wow.
You'd be like, Jason, hello.
Aye.
But as I said, I used to just press it and the Transformer scratch, which Grandmaster Flash is supposedly the person that was that said that came up with that. I was thinking, I was doing it before.
You just didn't get any credit.
I was doing it on my Walkman. I was transforming Adamant and ABBA on my Walkman. But no, I mean, huge, definitely a huge. Not. I don't remember seeing a lot of people with them, but for me, in terms of through Adamant, that album, I think it's called The Final Frontier. That's where my first kind of introduction to sort of drums came about. Mm-hmm. There's a few Adamant's. The music there was quite militant drumming going on in a lot of those tunes. And they were being quite taken by the drumming, and but at that I got like a little drum kit. My mum bought me a little drum kit. It was a tiny little kid's drum kit. I ended up putting the skins in, hitting it that hard because they were just plastic drum skins. They're not like proper. It wasn't a proper drum kit. It was a child's drum kit. I think I put my foot through one of them and all. I think there was a. I don't know if they were ever really that mindful of my interest to music at that stage, really.
I think they must have been, because they're giving you like a cassette player, a Walkman, a deck, a drum kit. You know, they're seeing you. They're seeing it's something that's keeping you quiet and out the way.
No, definitely. I mean, I think the tape deck in particular, I used to remember, I wished I still had the tapes. I used to record, we used to sit and record the telly, and I used to listen back to them. So I used to record like things like Happy Days and watching like films like Wizard of Oz and stuff like that, and listen back to the tapes. And I used to remember listening to the tapes, and you can hear me singing the songs, going along with things and stuff like that. I did have those tapes for a long time, and I don't know what happened to them. I thought I wished I had them because they were quite funny to listen to.
I suppose a very early kind of sampling in it.
Definitely, I was into more into the. I really loved the recording aspect of the cassette player. And I remember when I got into Lego, I actually tried to build Lego around the cassette player into something else. Like I'll build it into something, and I'll adapt the cassette player. Do you know what I mean? Because it was just it was a portable cassette player. It had a handle. I think it came with a strap as well that you could carry about. But we didn't get my gran had a transistor radio, and I remember battery operated, and I remember I used to go up to my gran's, and I used to take that out. I remember in particular on holidays, sunny days, and sneak it out the house and take it away to the park. You know what I mean? And go and see my pals with this, I mean, and back then you're talking about the late 70s, do you know what I mean? Early 80s. I mean, the channels that I was being able to play on the radio back then, it was just all... I think Radio 1, Radio 2, you know what I mean? It's not like it is today where it's just,
you never had a dedicated channel, a dance or whatever. It was just whatever was on the radio.
Nothing like that. So it would just be the general music of what was getting played at the day. So, and back then, there's a lot. My gran in particular was into country and western music. She liked Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, and I believe listening to my gran playing her music kind of had an influence on me subconsciously in some ways. I really like lyrics and storytelling lyrics in particular. So I like, I've always been a big fan of Big Country. And one of the reasons for that, I believe, is because of the storytelling that comes about by Stuart Adamson's lyric writing. But I also lived in Dunfermline, and I was his neighbour for quite some time as well. So
wow.
When I moved over, I lived in Edinburgh from 1973 till 1982. Just after the World Cup in 1982, it was España 82. Me and my mum moved to Dunfermline. And so when we moved to Dunfermline, we moved to a place called Elgin Court, which was a brand new housing development. Just kind of outside the town a little bit. And within I think it was about maybe 6 months, Stuart Adamson, I had never even heard of Big Country at this time. Stuart Adamson and his wife Sandra bought a house in the court. Me and my mum stayed at 22. They stayed at, I think it was 8 Elgin Court. And I saw Big Country when they played their first performance on Top of the Pops. I remember watching it in Elgin Court and being like, this guy lives
across the street,
just in this little court. It was quite would you say starstruck? I mean, it certainly was like, to me, I think it was something more about here's somebody who's involved in the music industry here. You know what I mean?
He's not in London or on the telly miles away. It's he's right here.
And if anybody who knows what Dunfermline's like, it's I've got a great affinity with Dunfermline, the Toon as they call it, and I really enjoyed the time that I spent living there, and particularly because of Big Country and because I got to know Stuart and Sandra and his first. Well, I didn't get to know Callum, but I babysat for his son Callum a couple of times. But Dunfermline is, even though it's only a short drive over the bridge from Edinburgh, it's like a different planet. It's so different over there. It's Fife in particular.
Even the different accent as well, isn't it?
funny you should say that. When my mum went over, when we first went over there, so my mum was in travel, and my mum used to work in Edinburgh for a company called Ellerman Travel. And the reason that we moved to Dunfermline is because she got offered the manager's position over there. So we went over there, and I remember the first time that I went out for a kind of wander around the town, and I got lost. And I actually spoke to two guys, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. And they were only Fifers. But Fife accents can be quite strong. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we've got all these different sort of pockets of Fife, Ballingery, Cooper, Kirkcaldy, Rosyth, Leven, there's all these little mining towns and all that. And I think there's slightly different accents going on. I suppose like there kind of is in Edinburgh way. I'm not necessarily sure about Glasgow, whether Glasgow has different dialects, from central Glasgow.
Definitely. Everywhere, I think everywhere's got wee colloquialisms in it, wee local colloquialisms.
But just prior to the Big Country, like musically for me, getting into music, Big Country were the first group that I really got into. But just before we moved from Edinburgh, we went to. There used to be a big department store in Edinburgh called Goldberg's, and I think they had one in Glasgow years ago. Massive department store in Edinburgh. It was huge. It was very, very popular. It was over multiple floors. It had an aviary on the roof, a big cafe that you could go to. This was the place to go for toys. And for when you went shopping with your ma and go to Goldberg's, you just left your ma in the toy department, and you said, and that's where you were going to be, because you got to play with all this stuff that all the new, especially in the 70s, that sort of. The technology was changing, like you said, the Walkman, there were more recordable devices, record players were coming more in the fashion. Even televisions, even back then, still weren't really commonplace in everybody's home. Mm-hmm. Even if they did, a lot of people had black and white tellies. So toys and stuff like that, it was like a really exciting time for... A lot of it was mechanical toys, winding up stuff, and, eventually you've got things like... Big Track, don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, that's right, the big white truck, innit? You could program it.
Like wee program thing, there was a lot of robotic stuff coming in, so as I said, Goldberg's was the place to go. But we went there one time and they had a record department, and we bought the Police album. I think it's the third album. It's called Zenyatta Mondata. I think it's how you pronounce it.
Right.
The first tune on it is Don't Stand So Close to Me. That, I would say, putting that record on and listening to that, it's funny. I saw Goldie talking about a tune, like what tune really, sparked your interest in music, and for him it was the Logical Song by Supertramp. Mm-hmm. But for me, Don't Stand So Close to You, when they play that, and I can do it now, I can put it on. It's got this kind of dark, kind of stringy intro thing. And I can put it on now, and I can almost be transported back to playing it for the first time. It's so impactful for me.
Yeah.
I really got into them and got to know their music quite well before Big Country. But again, one of the things that stood out from them was the drummer. The Police's drummer's called Steve Copeland. Mm-hmm. And that was another thinking, yeah, drums, I really like drums. So... I then started to want to kind of be a drummer, and once I got into Big Country, again, I mean, if people that know Big Country, the Mark Brzezicki, the drummer, is they've got a very militant style. Big Country's always had this kind of, I mean, they talk about the guitar playing being kind of bagpipe sound and stuff like that, which I know Stuart he didn't like that description of the guitar playing, because it's the effects, it's called an EBO that he uses on the strings. But yeah, I decided that I wanted to be that's when I decided I wanted to be a drummer. I really felt that I could, if I'm into drums, I want to be a drummer. And luckily for me, 5 minutes from my house in Dunfermline, in Elgin Street in Dunfermline, there was a place called Sound Control. And I was
one in Glasgow as well, aye.
I think they were quite widespread throughout Scotland at the time. So I used to go in there, and they had a big, massive drum room, and I used to just go in and somebody gave me a guitar when we were at that age, like a burst up guitar. It had like 2 strings on it, but I remember taking it there and buying the strings and getting it all linked up. But I used to go in. They had keyboards and everything, the early Casio keyboards. But I used to go in and I got to know the guys. I mean, I'm relatively still quite young. I mean, I would be like maybe 10, 11, that sort of age. And they used to let me go in and play the drums.
That's cool, isn't it? They'll let you just a kid in to blast in the drums.
Aye, they would just just crack on. Because obviously people would be going in and plugging guitars into amps and playing them and stuff like that. So I really got into that, playing in there. Then I got to know people through my mum who had a drum kit. I got to go and play on a drum kit at somebody's house that I know quite a lot. But I could never convince my mum to get me a drum kit.
It's a fucking racket to have in the house, man, isn't it? It's like a big commitment.
She's like, you're not getting a drum kit. I was like, I want to be a drummer. That's what I want to be. I was determined that's what I was going to be. So I ended up getting a drum pad, which is, I don't know if you're aware, a little rubber pad and a pair of sticks. And I used to have headphones, and my gran bought us a stereo, our first, what you maybe want to call a ghetto blaster, and I got a drumming sort of tutorial cassette tape that I used to play with my headphones on and try and emulate what I was hearing playing on the drum pad.
Paradiddles and all these kind of things. Remember the things like that? Try to learn the snares and stuff.
And funnily enough, again, just up the road from Sound Control, the TA was there. The Dunfermline's TA were there. And they used to be out with the snare, like the band, on a regular basis with the snares. Like 20 guys on snare drums, with a big drum round them. And I used to go up and watch them I used to go up and stand at the gate and watch them through the gate, and used to love the sound of snares, especially that military drum kind of snare. That tat 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 tat. Yeah. The kind of stuff you would see at the tattoo.
Aye.
But again, my mum just was not into buying me a drum kit.
We'd say in Ayrshire, a richt ticht snare drum.
Is that right?
So, like from that, where did the movement come into getting a set of decks and working that? I mean, are you aware of, we're a similar age, so like, a funny feeling like, hip hop's coming into your life pretty soon. That's electro. When's that seeping into things? So
via that tape deck that my gran bought me, or bought us when we lived in Dunfermline, I think it was an Amstrad tape deck. It's quite a nice one. My mum tended to not really listen to that much music. It's funny because I spoke to her about a couple of years ago about the record player that we had. She said, that was John, our partner at the time. He bought us that, and he had a record shop. I said, I didn't know that. She did listen to music sometimes, but it wasn't really something she did on a daily basis. Even now, she doesn't really listen to that much music. So that ghetto blaster used to be basically stationed in my bedroom. I used to keep it. My mum, as I said, did listen to tapes. So I used to go listen to radio channels, and one of the first, we all listened to the top 40 charts on a Sunday, back then, and we could record that had a recordable tape deck. So, everybody talks about recording the charts and sitting with it on pause, trying to cut talking, so you could have a tape, in a sense, of simultaneous music without the smashy and nicey.
They talking or jingles, kind of thing, just all the tunes.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So, other than the top 40 charts on a Sunday, the first person that I really got tuned into in terms of hearing different music was John Peel. And that was on, I think it was Radio 1 that he had it was like a nighttime show. I think it was quite late at night. It was like 10 o'clock at night or something like that. And through him, I used to start here. I mean, John Peel would be champion any style of music. I mean,
right across the board, wasn't it?
No, everything, any different styles. But again, I think going through, as you did back then, going through the dial, seeing what you can pick up, try to see if you can hear the Police on a channel. Like, what's that? Somebody's talking in an aircraft, you know, and like. But I eventually came across a DJ called Mike Allen, who did a show called National Fresh. And now National Fresh was on Capital Radio in London, but it was broadcast in Scotland, again, through late night, through Radio 4. They seem to put it on, they seem to broadcast it in Scotland. So I think I'd maybe heard something early kind of rap music on John Peel, but then when I found this National Fresh, this Mike Allen show, it was just like, what the fuck is this? It was like a whole fucking, like, you know, a whole show of this kind of music. I didn't even know what the fuck it was called, you know, but obviously the terminology they were kind of using. Mike Allen, like, I'd recommend anybody to go on YouTube and look at his show, listen to his shows. He's very much of that old style DJing, how he talks, but it just seemed to really fit the hip hop, the earlier hip hop and electro sort of sounds that were kind of starting to come out at that time. So I think we're looking at, like, I'm thinking about 82, around 80. So we moved to Dunfermline in 82. I'm thinking about 83, 84, around then. But I don't know if I saw the film Breakdance came out. I can't even remember how I used to go to the cinema on a regular basis, as we all did back then when there was less things to do. Going to the cinema was a regular occurrence for children growing up. It was a big thing. We went to the cinema on a Friday or get a chippy.
It was a kind of a new thing as well, wasn't it? Like, as in all the big blockbusters back then. And
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, a huge, like I said, with the technology, films were coming out left, right, and centre. I mean, all big classic films that came out in the early, the 80s. But Breakdance, the movie, or Breakin' as it's called, I think the original name is Breakin', but it was marketed in Europe as Breakdance. I went to see that at the Odeon Cinema in Edinburgh, on Clark Street in Edinburgh, which is actually closed now, but it's been closed for years, but it's actually going to be opening back up seemingly. I used to go through on the train and stay at my grand's at the weekends sometimes, and I'd go to the cinema, and I went to see Breakdance at the Odeon on a Saturday morning, and I think out of everything that had happened previously, getting the tape deck was, getting the little Ferguson tape player was good, and the Walkman, and even the drum pad and stuff like that. But when I went to see Breakdance the movie, that fucking blew my head open. It was just like, I was watching for the first time. Obviously, we're hearing scratching and tunes and stuff like that, but I didn't know what is scratching. I mean, these noises in these tunes that I'm listening to on Mike Allen's National Fresh, but nobody knows what it is.
Or how it's created, though.
Maybe talking about it, but what the fuck? What is scratching? So,
yeah.
In Breakdance the movie, there is there's a couple of battle scenes in a place called the Radiotron. So the Radiotron, which I subsequently found out years later, was a community centre which was in, I think it was in East LA. It was actually a real community centre, which was pretty much used for disadvantaged children in the area. It was so people used to go along who were into spray art and breakdance and music, and just generally, I think, a community place for children to kind of hang out that wasn't, keeping them away from the gangs in LA, because LA, obviously, we're all, about Compton and places like gang culture in LA was huge in the 80s. I mean, it's been huge since the 60s. A lot of people don't know the background to all the Crips and the Bloods, and, goes way, way back to the 60s. But one of the scenes in the Radiotron, it's Ice-T on stage. So Ice-T was a regular at the Radiotron. There's some really funny video footage of Ice-T breakdancing online that you should look up on YouTube. It's really funny. But he was an up-and-coming rapper at the time. But the DJ in the scene is a DJ called Chris the Glove Taylor. And this is the first time that I saw a set of Technics and also saw Scratch It and thinking, that's how they're making that sound.
Yep.
He's doing that by touching the record and pulling the record back and forth. But the music that's in the break-in, that album, the breakdance album for me is what, I've listened to it hundreds and hundreds of times over the years. It was actually what I think I eventually got it as a cassette tape. Remember, I used to go about my BMX and listen and another Walkman that I got and used to listen to that album so much. But I remember coming out of the Odeon and being like, that is what I'm going to be doing.
Yep.
That is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what he's doing. I'm going to be a DJ.
XL Podcast.
That film, you mentioned breakdancing and all, it's kind of like all these things, it's kind of like, it became youth, like our thing is like a youth movement, seeing shit like that, it related, like even that film, it was like something that you could relate to, like kids, music, this mad thing, breakdancing, and it's filtering through with all your other sort of, no clubs, but, breakdancing, BMX, and that was kind of our internet. That was the hub where all your pals go together to talk about what you were into and share what you were into. And that film was always like, how many people's left there going, I want to be a breakdancer, I want to be a spray painter, I want to be I want to be everything was in that film that was
100%
relevant.
Yeah. Hugely impactful. When you go online and read, in particular YouTube, if you read the comments about things, you'll see similar people like myself saying, oh, I was so inspired by it that I went on to, like you said, not just, maybe they may be film directors, book writers, or
right across the board.
It seemed to just open up this like, wow, this is amazing. I mean, the soundtrack is really, really good for breakdance. I mean, breaking, there's a lot of, people will say, oh, breakdance is a bit commercial. Whereas the film Beat Street, which is another well-known breakdance film, which is based in New York, that was more, people would say, oh, that's a bit more credible, because LA and New York are, back then in particular, poles apart in so many different ways. California's, it's a big sunshine state and good weather. Everybody dresses differently. You've obviously got Venice Beach and all that, which features in the film, and a lot of people, a lot of people do know. But one of the scenes in Venice Beach where it's like people who used to do breakdancing, which I did try it, but I wasn't very good at it. But people would take a ghetto blaster and go and take a bit of lino or a massive bits of cardboard and go somewhere and breakdance out in the street. And one of the scenes in Venice Beach, it's actually got Jean-Claude Van Damme's dancing in one of the scenes.
It's the cringiest dance ever, isn't it? He's just hanging about trying to be famous, isn't he?
Yeah, a big spandex, like black, tight spandex outfit, clapping and dancing, but everybody's having a really good time. But the New York scene was very different, and it's funny because people slag break that. People who think that the purest sound hip hop is New York, the Bronx, and Brooklyn, and Queens, and stuff like that. And I suppose in some ways it is, but LA, which is where the electro sound came from, that's where that was developed. And whilst it still had rapping, when you look at people like the World Class Wrecking Crew, which was Dr. Dre's first production and crew, how they dressed, bearing in mind the 80s as well, there was quite a lot of glam.
They were all dressed as doctors and all that. That's how he got his name, wasn't it? Like mad shit.
It was the big sequin jackets, big kind of shoulder pads and stuff like that. So a lot, New York, people who are down with the more kind of what they would determine the cooler side of hip hop frowned upon that look, say. And I think Dr. Dre and all that, they would say, "Oh, we can't believe we dressed like that."
Aye, but then they're probably getting inspired by like Parliament and P-Funk and all that kind of stuff, like
it was
psychedelic rock or whatever you wanted to call it.
There was the LA, and I think a lot of a lot of that comes down to the weather. I think the weather.
Aye.
I mean, look. I mean, it's been nice in Scotland for the last few days, and I know that I think we're all different when it's sunny. We're just a bit more buoyant. And I think if you lived somewhere like LA in California and you had somewhere like Venice Beach, I mean, you look at it back then, I mean, I've still never been to, I've been to New York 3 times, but I've never been to LA. When you look back and you see it, girls are going about in roller skates but everybody is ripped to death on the Muscle Beach and looks great, you know what I mean? And then LA's always kind of had that, whereas New York's always been a bit more kind of
gritty.
Doing, baseball caps on, baseball cap backwards, and a bit more kind of, it's more of that kind of homeboy kind of style rather than the flamboyant LA sort of stuff. Although they did get there eventually. I mean, it did change when the gang culture and all that started to infiltrate more of the music side of things and stuff like that. But going back to your question about the turntables, so after seeing breakdance and seeing Chris the Glove Taylor on the decks, I have no idea what a set of Technics were. I didn't know they were called Technics decks. I just saw these things on the screen and him doing that, using the mixer, and it's very basic scratching, but some of the tunes are really good tunes that were out in that film. I then, again, through Stu Allen's National Fresh show, became aware of a label called Street Sounds. And I remember them talking about it. I mean, I bought the breakdance cassette. I remember that was the first cassette that I bought that had any kind of rap music on it, because the music that's in breakdance it's not all rap music.
It's quite across the genre, isn't it?
Chaka Khan, what's her big famous...
Feel For You?
Ain't Nobody.
Ain't Nobody, aye. Am I getting mixed up? Was that Endless Love on breakdance, the movie cassette? It was quite a ballady kind of thing, or am I getting mixed up with another?
No, I'm not sure, but Ain't Nobody is on it, and that I'm obviously a huge, massive Shaka Khan track, and it's a really good scene in the film when they use that.
Is Kraftwerk on that as well? He does the thing with the brush. Am I getting mixed up with another breakdancing film?
So no. So Turbo, that scene with Turbo outside the shop with the brush, with the moonwalk and stuff like that. So that scene's in breakdance. So that's
Kraftwerk, one of those.
Kraftwerk Tour de France. So I came across them talking about this Street Sounds in the compilation. It was they were talking about it. It was a compilation. I mean, again, I didn't really like compilation albums and stuff like that. We weren't familiar with these kind of things back then. I don't think there was really many of them anyway. The 12-inch singles were put 7-inch. Then the 12-inch single became more popular. It was like extended. I mean, when you think back to those times, I mean, 12 inches would be pretty much just extended versions of the 7-inch single. Weren't really remixes. They just had longer intros and big long sections. So again, I was living in Dunfermline at the time. I thought, right, I'm going to go up. It was a Saturday morning. I'm going to go up to John Menzies in Dunfermline. They had a music department, and see if I can find the Street Sounds. This electro, so Street Sounds electro, hip hop and electro. That's what the albums were called. So I've gone in there, I'm expecting to walk into this place and say, they're going to have this here. This is Dunfermline we're in, pal. This is no London. Do you know what I mean? So I asked somebody at the counter, I'm looking for this Street Sounds electro, hip hop electro. And they said, if you go and look over there in this section. And I found, and here was a tape, Street Sounds hip hop electro volume 13. I remember picking it up and being like, this is almost like Willy Wonka golden fucking tin material. To me, I'm like, I cannot believe this. They've got this music here in John Menzies in Dunfermline.
And how the fuck did I get 1 to 12?
That was just like, So I was like, right. So I remember going all the way home and putting it on. And that again was just another moment of thinking, oh, this is just like this is more what I'm into. This whatever this is, hip hop, electro. So obviously becoming more familiar with hearing the terms on the radio, the word hip hop, electro, rap. I mean, I tend to call it rap music because hip hop, which a lot of people, I know people say hip hop music, but hip hop is the overarching umbrella for the culture, which covers everything under like breakdancing, graffiti, beatboxing, rapping. You know, hip hop's the brand name, but people will say hip hop music. But I would always say I'm into rap music back then because that's what people said. Oh, it's rap music. So it was rapping electro. So Street Sounds Electro albums were predominantly kind of electro sounding rather than more. It seemed to be more West Coast sounding. So I was very much influenced by those cassettes. And that tape, I used to listen to that again on my BMX, on the Walkman, all the time. So through that, in the inlay of the cassette, it said that they had a newsletter that you had to. I think you sent away like stamps or something, or you paid £2 or something, and you could be added to a mailing list, and you got a fortnightly newsletter, and it was called Rumours. So I applied for that, and I got the first newsletter. And this was just an A3 sheet, folded like in an A4, double-sided. And it basically had all information about, I think, release schedules for Street Sounds, charts, maybe some adverts. I did have a copy, but I lost it over the years, which is, I'm pissed off about that because on the back page, there was a classified ad section, and it was people kind of selling records, but looking for like DJs. I think they were trying to make little, people would put in we're looking to make a rap crew here, blah, 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 get in touch kind of thing. So I thought, I'm going to write to these people to ask, how do you become a DJ? How do you become a scratch mix DJ? That's what I was going to be, a scratch mix DJ. Wrote to them, and they wrote me a letter back, which I've still got the letter that they sent back to me, basically saying you could look for local crews and what you would need to get. I said, what would you need to get? And they told me like a set of Technics. I think they said the set of Technics turntables. They recommended a GLI mixer, which was a popular mixer back then. But they also said you could also put an ad in the classified section. So I basically wrote, I don't know if that cost me anything, but I put it in it, the next edition. And it was basically looking to learn how to be a scratch mix DJ, blah, blah, blah. Again, I'm living in Dunfermline. It's, you would think, is there going to be other people around? You had your number on it. Anyway, this guy contacted me, funnily enough, who lived in Fife as well. He lived in a place called, when I was talking about these back out places in Fife, these little pockets, mining towns. He lived in a place called Collinsborough, which is not far from Leven. It's a tiny wee village. And this guy who lived there had been getting into the music at the same as me.
The same ages as you?
He was about, I think he's 2 or 3 years older than me. Right. A guy called David. He said, so he phoned me and he said, I've got a little kind of setup. You should come through.
That's fucking blowing your mind straight away, isn't it?
I'm like, fucking hell, man. This guy's gone. So he wasn't very, I don't think at the time when he was clear. I think he said he didn't have any Technics, but he had some kind of setup. So I got the bus from Dunfermline to Kirkcaldy. He met me in Kirkcaldy, and whilst we were in Kirkcaldy, we went to a record shop that was there, which is no longer there now, called Sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sleeves was a popular store back then. I don't know if they had them elsewhere in Scotland or if it was a Fife store, but he had been shopping in the Sleeves, and this was the first time that I got to see albums in 12 inches in the music in a shop to buy.
But in a rack for that style.
Yeah, he had a rap music section in the shop, and he'd been coming here and buying these. I mean, they were imports. They weren't cheap. I mean, I was again like, I must have been 14. No, in fact, 12, 13, about 12 or 13. 84, 85, so it's around that time. So anyway, we then got the bus from Kirkcaldy to Leven, and then another bus for Leven, or a bus to Collinsborough, or Collinsbury, I think they pronounce it. So we've gone into his bedroom, and he's got a record player and a tape deck and a mixer. And we've been like, so how does this work? This guy was he was training to be an electrician. He had worked out. So this mixer that he'd bought was a Tandy realistic mixer. Everybody got one of these. These were bog standard mixers. Don't know if you got one yourself. There was a little black mixer. Mm-hmm. It was like a 4-channel mixer with the tiniest crossfader. You got Tandy was like the Maplins of its day back in the 80s. It was a general kind of electrical store where you could buy components and little bits of kit and stuff like that. CB radios and stuff like that. But they sold this mixer, realistic mixer. I think it was about 100 quid. He'd worked out if he'd taken the back off the turntable and got the cable that went to the speakers out and attached it to one of the phono lines on the mixer as a in channel, and done the same with what was a portable double cassette player with removable speed, one of those ones that had the unit and you could slide off the speakers at the side.
That's right, aye.
You could move it, or you could have the speakers like that, or you could, it was a kind of like a wee boombox ghetto blaster thing. He'd done the same with that, undone one of the speaker cable, the connection at the back, and put it again. Now, I'm not talking about putting the phono lead into the socket. He had wrapped the copper wire round the actual phono connection. Mm-hmm. Put the headphones on, put a tape on, and be able to play through the headphones and touch the record. And
playing a cassette and then scratch over the top of it with one deck.
Aye.
Brilliant. I love that necessity. He's figured out how he could do it because the technology was unaffordable or unattainable, and he's fucking developed that for him.
Definitely. So I'm there thinking,
this guy's Buck Rogers.
This is amazing, man. He's playing, and I mean, this record player that he had was a standard hi-fi record deck. Like a system, a hi-fi system with a cassette deck and a radio tuner and that on. Generally people had in the home. So I think I can't remember whether it was, it would be a belt drive. So the belt drive obviously, maybe people know what belt drive is. So the old turntable systems used to be a rubber band that went from one motor attached to the main cog underneath, which spun the record. So when you touched it, it kind of stopped. So you had to be really, really light on what you were doing. Yeah. Now, bear in mind, I had no scratching ability or anything like that, but just to be able to hear, it wasn't coming out the speakers. You had to have the headphones on and play the tape and muck around with the track over the top of it. Very basic and primitive in a sense, but amazing at the same time.
Yep.
Just to have that ability to do that. So I was like, right, I'm going to get something like this. I only had a cassette player, the one that my gran bought me. I then got the mixer. I convinced my mum to get me this mixer from Tandy. I think they were £100, which was quite a lot back then. And then I got I think it was a Sanyo, a cheap Sanyo from Edinburgh. Used to have all these kind of like Alibaba's kind of caves shops where you could go in and buy non-branded like ghetto blaster things for imported stuff. Didn't even ken what that brand is. Sanyesho, Hitiba, a mixed hybrid versions. So I got this tape deck, got the mixer, and my mum's friends gave me a hi-fi system. He came through to my house and he set the same system up for me in my bedroom in Dunfermline.
Brilliant.
And I was just like, I was made up. But he was like, I'm saving up to buy these. So I think through him, he was like, so the turntables, whether it was through him or obviously became aware, there's a brand that's called Technics. These are
the daddies.
These are what you need to get, but like I said, very expensive. Do you know what I mean? So I wasn't working. I was still at school. He was. I think he was in an apprenticeship as an electrician. He was saying, I'm saving up for these. So the day came when he had enough money to buy them. And I went with him through to Glasgow. He bought them from, I don't know if it was Richard Sounds in Glasgow.
I was going to say Richard Sounds, probably next to 23rd Precinct, or...
No, it was one, it might have been, I don't know if it was a sound control in Glasgow as well. Did they have a sound control in Glasgow?
Aye, it was in Jamaica Street, kind of at the bottom of the town. Like
like at a bridge, near a bridge.
Aye, if you come out Central Station, you go down to your right, away from the city almost.
Aye,
that's where...
He definitely got for there. I went with him and he'd ordered them and bought them, and we carried them back to the state. I remember walking...
Heavy as well, man.
One turntable, 1200, you got the 1200s, the silver ones, carrying them back to Glasgow to Edinburgh, and I had to leave... Did I go? But I didn't go back with him for Fife. I think I went as far as Dunfermline, and he went on with the turntables. And I was like, when am I coming through, man?
Uh-huh.
I mean, when am I coming back to your house to, see this? And the first time, I didn't have any records at this point. I didn't, other than the albums and stuff that my mum had in like a significant 7-inch collection. But I started seeing this girl, and she'd been buying 12-inch remixes, and I told her, I'm going to make you a mixtape. I'm like, give me your records that you've got. So she gave me Erasure, Debbie Gibson, Taylor Dane, and I can't remember who did that song, I Love My Radio. I can't remember who sung that song. Anyway, took these through. And I went through to his house and I actually made a mixtape. I actually still think I've got the mixtape. I think I actually got it. So I remember, we were looking at like, how do you get the things to match up? Obviously, never touched Technics turntables before, understand the pitch control or anything. Being like, I remember just being in awe, like going to his bedroom and seeing the pair of Technics turntables set with a mixer. What I saw in breakdance, somebody's now got it in their bedroom.
You're in the future, man, aren't you? You're just looking at this thing and...
Oh, it was definitely, way ahead of its time in terms of, the technical aspect. But he said, well, what we need to do is we need to find out which tune mixes with this tune. And we're looking for the BPM. So at that time, a lot of people don't know this, but DJ Magazine used to be called Jocks. Way back in the 80s, it was called Jocks Magazine. There was two big magazines around there. Prior to that, most people would have grown up with Smash Hits, Number One Magazine, Jackie for the girls and all that kind of stuff like that. But the music press, you had Melody Maker, which was a big paper that you got. Again, that sound control in Dunfermline, I used to go and pick up these things and used to read about stuff that was going on in the music. And so Jocks Magazine would have charts, and in the charts they would have the BPMs of the tracks. These were for disc jockeys to understand what the BPMs of your tracks are for playing or mixing. Prior to that, you got to remember that back then clubs didn't have Technics turntables. You're talking about the disco era, the early club, the late mid 80s, the 60s and 70s and 80s, all DJs who were DJs. Before the Technics, I remember seeing a console in my grand's catalogue, and it was a DJ console thing for mobile discos. And I nearly convinced, I thought, I'm going to get one of these. This must be what I need to get. This, which were just ultimately two record players joined in a unit I think the mixer, I think there was faders down here on a panel down in front.
And a microphone maybe and some disco lights or something.
I remember saying, I'm going to get rope lights and get, you could buy a unit thing for it and all that. So thankfully I never got that. But so anyway, with the BPMs, I remember doing the tape and said, right, this track goes with this one. And I'm actually scratching Taylor Dane, Prove Your Love on that mixtape. Actually scratching it for the first time. I think I've got the cassette, and it's actually not that bad. So what I then was able to do with my own setup, I didn't get Technics for quite some time after that. But what I did do, prior to me getting that setup, I got given what's a standard BSR turntable, which is a little. They were quite popular in the 70s. It was like a little cog. It wasn't a direct drive. It wasn't a belt driven. It was cog driven. Little record player that had like a black case. Somebody gave me that. It had the control for 33, 45 and 78 for playing it. It was a straight arm portable turntable. I got that. I had that, and I remember buying I think I got my first 12-inch, which was DJ Cheese and Word of Mouth, Coast to Coast it's called. And through Jocks magazine, I saw them advertising about slip mats, and I remember saying, I'm going to get one of these slip mat things. So I bought one, a Jocks slip mat, for about a tenner or something. But prior to that, I used the sleeve. I put the 12-inch sleeve and drew a pen round it and cut the sleeve out into around this 12-inch.
Did you not take the grease push paper? Did you not go into that one?
Eventually, I did go into using that. But I remember using that as a slip mat and using this little deck, and practicing scratching on this little portable turntable. And you had to lift up the record. You had to lift up the side of it. If you couldn't really touch it as such. You had to lift, like, kind of almost bend the 12 up a wee bit to scratch like that. But anyway, so once I got that set up, again, I was able to learn very much basic. I mean, they didn't even really have the sounds and stuff like that, like the scratch sounds. I mean, you would hear sounds in tracks and you think, well, where are they getting these? What's the sound that they're using? Mm-hmm. So ultimately, you would just be using any kind of vocally bit and just kind of just mucking around, man. And again with the fader. I mean, as I say, that realistic mixer had the smallest fader that I've ever worked on. And if you can learn to scratch on that mixer, you would let scratch on any mixer, because it was like a tiny little thing that you held. It's not like the day with a big button, So anyway, after I had that system for quite some years. My mum was a single parent, and my mum, whilst she was in high level management, she ended up managing Thomas Cook. So Lund Poly, she was a manager for Lund Poly in the Kingsgate Shopping Centre in Dunfermline first. Subsequently, used to book Stuart Adamson's most of his holidays. So we eventually moved back to Edinburgh. By which time I was having quite a lot of behavioural issues.
As every teen did.
Yeah, and just I was just having problems with my mum. I was clashing with her, hormones. I wasn't. My schooling was all over the place. So we moved from Dunfermline to a place called Pennycook, which is just on the outskirts of Edinburgh. It's about 12 miles outside Edinburgh. And that was spring 1988. It was after the Easter break. We moved in the Easter break. And I started going to Pennycook High School. And I think I started in the August, and by September I got suspended. I'd never been suspended or anything. I mean, been in trouble at school and stuff like that. But my behavioural sort of issues started to kind of escalate, and I subsequently ended up in care for 3 months. So, and And that was quite a troublesome time for me on a personal level, as it was for my mum and everybody else in the family. Basically just got put into the care system. And one of my saving graces was that by this point, I had a little cassette carry case, and I had a whole mixture of cassettes that were all predominantly recorded Mike Allen National Fresh shows, my breakdance tape, my hip hop electro. I had a few of the collection by this point. And I took I took my Ghetto Blaster stereo that my granddad bought me into the home, and that kind of saw me through what was a hugely difficult and challenging period for me as a young, I was 14 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I got out, I think, at the end of November in '88, and I remember being like talking to my mum and being like wanting to get the turntable. So anyway, my mum decided to buy me my first Technics turntable. So she bought it from a place called Hi-Fi Corner, which was in Rose Street in Edinburgh. I think the deck was, not really sure how, I see various people talking about prices of Technics decks back then. I'm sure she maybe paid something in the region of maybe £300-400.
It's a big ask as well, isn't it, man? Getting that kind of present. But I think your mum's seen this is the thing that's kind of possibly keeping you out of trouble and focus your energy zone, isn't it?
100%. And I think, it could have been so different. I mean, I could have been a drummer. She could have built me a drum kit now, and I was very passionate about that in myself. I believed that I could be a drummer, and I wanted to had a desire to be a drummer. But once I discovered the DJing side of things, the drumming, I've actually got a drum kit now. It's not mine, it's one of my daughters, so I actually do go and have a play on it now and again. It's actually at my mum's. But so I got one Technics deck for that Christmas after coming out the care system. And so I now had the Technics deck, the Realistic mixer, and the Hi-Fi, the turntable. So now I had the ability to play music. Obviously, the Hi-Fi didn't have any pitch control, whereas the Technics did. I then started to work on developing my scratching more. I mean, because ultimately for me, I was going to be, this is what I was going to be. I'm going to be a scratch mix, the hip hop DJ. That was what my main goal was and desire, was to be a hip hop scratch mix DJ in a rap group or something like that. So I was able to hone my skills on the one turntable, scratching and stuff like that. And basically just self-taught how to scratch.
There isn't any internet back then, man. And it's a small scene to actually try and find other people. You were lucky through that fanzine that you met that other guy, but...
Yeah, I mean, hugely... beneficial knowing David and meeting him, and he was really good on the decks as well. And very much into the scratching techniques and learning stuff like that. Again, you didn't know, like, I mean, when you hear scratching sounds, you think, right, how is it? So again, without the sounds that people were using in tracks, you're just having to use like a vocal bit or a drum or a snare drum or something like that, and just do something with it, and I mean do something very basic, like jiggy like this, but nothing like you just started like this and then say, well, I can get my hand to do this, and and then I move it a wee bit. You just, as you're going along, you're developing your own techniques and style. So I then my mum bought me the second turntable I don't know if it was the following Christmas or before. I think it might have been before. And then that was me. I was set up at that point with that mixer and my Technics decks. So I'd got some tunes prior to that. I'd got some albums. My first hip hop albums that I got were LL Cool J's Radio album, Eric B. and Rakim Paid in Full album, Public Enemy, Yo Bum Rush the Show, and I got a Schoolie D album, Schoolie D's first album. But just prior to that, just to skip back a bit, in 1987, through National Fresh, Mike Allen's National Fresh show, I discovered I'd heard the Beastie Boys. And through going to Sound Control and Dunfermline and picking up the free music press, I found out that the Beastie Boys were going to be doing this tour called the License to Ill Tour in 1987. And they were coming to Glasgow. And I was like, I'm going to this. And I mean, I was underage. I think I was only 14. I was 14 at the time. I think I might have just been turned 14. That was in May. May 1987 that concert was. But you had to be accompanied by an adult, I think, if you were under 16 to go to that concert. I mean, have I been to Glasgow before that? I don't know if I'd ever even been. Had I been to Glasgow? I didn't think I'd even been through to Glasgow. Anyway, my uncle said he would take me. So my uncle drove through, still living in Dunfermline at this point. My uncle drove through, he lived in Pennock in Edinburgh. He drove through and we went to the Barrowlands to see the Beastie Boys 1987 and we went in and we watched it. For me, I think breakdance, the impact of watching breakdance in 84, this was superseded by going to this concert and hearing music that I'd heard on the radio on National Fresh getting played through the sound system in the Barrowlands. And I remember being, oh man, I know these tunes. I've either heard them on the radio and playing, because the warm-up for the Beastie Boys that night was a guy called Davey D, who was signed to Def Jam Records at the time, but he was the tour DJ for the License to Ill 1987 tour, which toured the UK. I think it toured the UK, now America, Europe, and the UK, and they went all around the world, I think, with that tour initially for that first album. But I know. I think, did you say you had gone to that concert? Mm-hmm. So
but for me, it wasn't just being in awe of the music and the stage. It was like looking about and seeing all these people that looked at it was like it looked the part. They were wearing fucking Kangols and baseball hats and cool t-shirts, and you're just going, these cunts, where are these cool folk come from? What the fuck? You started questioning your own fucking what you're wearing, and I want to look like that guy, man. And there's hundreds, thousands of people here.
Yeah, I mean,
in a scene.
Yeah, I mean, people who I spoke to quite a few people over the years who were actually there, and probably a similar kind of feelings and emotions for them personally, thinking, oh, this is amazing. These people, when you especially when I lived in Dunfermline, and I know this other guy in Fife, and we're like, there's other people like this in Scotland. Where are they? Everybody find them. But you went to the Barrowlands to that gig. I mean, and I always talk about. I mean, I love Glasgow as a city, and for me, going to the Barrowlands. I mean, the Barrowlands holds. I mean, it's so significant for me in my musical journey to have been able to go to that concert, hear these tunes, and obviously see the Beastie Boys on their first ever tour. Mm-hmm. And because of what happened that night, because I don't know if you remember, there was trouble.
I wasn't sure if it was that. The Def Jam tour, there was trouble with that as well. It was a bit shady.
So there was trouble at the Beastie Boys concert. What happened at the Beastie Boys concert? Because in the last couple of years, the live recording from that became available online. The Beastie Boys concert was hugely significant, and following that, the 1987 Def Jam tour as well. Mm-hmm. So for me, as I said, I mean, I thought it was going to be like the Terminator X of Scotland. That's what I was. I'm going to be. I'm a hip hop DJ. I mean, my music. That's the lifeblood of me. And it is my real musical roots. I mean, The Police, Big Country, Adamant, and even ABBA and Mike Oldfield, Blue Peter are all part of my journey. Do you know what I mean? But hip hop in particular for me is like that's almost like my real foundation musically that I really started to build myself up from, and from a DJ perspective. So as we got into the 90s, it's funny. People used to say to me all the time, "You think you're black?" And I used to say, "How's that?" And they say, "Because of the music that you listen to." Yeah. I mean, a lot of my pals will now cite that, if it wasn't for you, we would never have got into all this music and stuff like that. I mean, I was way ahead of the curve, mate.
You're also the weirdo. in the friends group, innit? I think he's a fucking black guy from America, or it's you're like. I know back then, being the DJ or being into music or whatever, you were kind of the outcast or the weirdo at school or whatever, weren't you?
I suppose. I wouldn't go so fast as to say weirdo.
Well, you know what I mean, but it was like everybody else was fucking into Bruce Springsteen or Iron Maiden, and it was only a kind of select few that were into, I would say, hip hop, dance music culture.
But ultimately, it's funny talking about the hip hop and rap music and stuff like that. I mean, initially, when you look back to the sort of late 70s and when the music was coming about, it was, they talked about, this is just a fad. This is not going to last very long, this music.
Yep.
I mean, look now, hip hop music is the biggest selling music out of all musical styles in the world.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Everything, rock music, jazz, everything. Hip hop's the biggest seller. To come from where it's come to where it is now is phenomenal. Whilst I don't particularly like a lot of today's kind of rap music, mumble rap, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm a bit of a purist in that sense that, I mean, I've always liked my beats quite hard, quite rough and rugged kind of things, style-wise. But, for me, to continue DJing, I was thinking, right, I'm going to be in a crew. I actually got one of my mates, and we're going to start, right, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to write lyrics, you're going to rap, and I'm going to be the DJ. And I remember I was doing it in my mum's, in my bedroom at my mum's, doing this, and one of my mates that still talks it, we can still recite the rhymes that we actually wrote. But so come 89, 90,
you're at the crossroads, aren't you?
there was something happening. Like my mates were like, we're going to this thing. It's on a Friday night. It's a disco. I was like, disco? Like, yeah, up the tune. It's Buster Brown's under 18s disco. Now, Buster Brown's, for those that don't know, was a very, very popular nightclub in Edinburgh. During the 70s in particular and the 80s. It was where all the big stars went: David Bowie, Blondie, Debbie Harry, all the big stars, all the footballers, Hearts and Hibs used to go there. Sunday nights at Buster Brown's over 21s were massively popular. It's huge. It's so. But my mate said, we're going to this under 18s disco on a Friday. I said, I'm not going to a disco. That's not for me.
Because you're hip hop, man. You're street. You're cool.
I'm not going to a disco. They're like, you should come. There's loads of tidy birds there.
All right.
I didn't ken like. So anyway, they said you should come along. Come and check it out anyway. So I went the following week, and I remember not being like, I mean, it was all right. This was the first time that I'd been in a nightclub environment, I think it was. So Buster Brown's used to be on Market Street, which is, if you come out the back of Waverley Station, that's Market Street. So the front, obviously, is Princes Street side, and the back street is Market Street. So the club was just on that street there. It's now an art gallery called the Fruit Market Gallery. But one of my mates, a guy for Pennycook was there, and he said, I'm going to go and ask the DJ if you can get a shot. But know that, I'm not going to records, but I've just come to the night to see what this under 18s disco. Now, they were right. There was a lot of tidy lasses there. So, I was thinking, there's, like nice looking lasses. And so he's gone away and spoke to the DJ, and he said, right, come over and speak to him. So went over and spoke to the DJ, a guy DJ called Grant Duff. And he said, what to do is if you come next week and bring your records and come before the doors open, I think about an hour before the doors open, I think the under 18s went on from something like 7 till 10 or something like that. So following week, got my records. This is ultimately an audition that I'm going to. And I remember being quite apprehensive and anxious about thinking, oh man, this, but I'd already had built up a kind of skill set in the bedroom anyway. I was doing. By this time, I had breakbeat albums, you know, for instrumentals. I was mixing different tunes over things and stuff like that. So I was, you know, well oiled in what I was doing at that point. It'd been about a whole year of practicing in the bedroom, so I could mix tunes together.
Yep.
So I've gone to the Buster Browns and went in before the club opened, and he put me on the decks and he just said, right, play. So he stood and watched me, came off. I remember playing this breakbeat. It was actually the Eamon drum break on a Norman Cook album called All Star Breaks. And I remember trying to do something and the breakbeat ran out. And I remember being like, oh, fuck. Anyway, he just said, right, you're going to be playing later on that night. And I was like, really? He's like, aye, you're going to be playing.
It's probably the first time you've ever seen somebody technical, you know, like if you're doing all the mixing and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So anyway, I ended up playing at Buster Brown's. It was ultimately, I wouldn't go so far to say it was a kind of residency, but I was playing there on a regular basis. I was playing there weekly. It was on every Friday night, so I would go in and Grant Duff was the main DJ. Now, just to talk about Buster Brown's, the over 21s. The over 21s DJ was a guy called Ronnie McEwen, who is Les McEwen from the Bay City Rollers' brother. He was the first DJ in Edinburgh to DJ on Technics. They were the first club to have them installed in a club in Edinburgh. So they were kind of ahead of everybody else, because you were coming from the 80s, in the mid 80s, late 80s was kind of still a bit of a run on from the disco era. The DJs were still, yeah, everybody, come on the floor, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, and playing tunes. There was no mixing. The DJ was a kind of.
It was a mic in between a mix, wasn't it? It was like.
Yeah, you know, talking on the mic, you know. But Buster Brown's it's been cited as the kind of, I mean, I know it's not the same stature wise, but it's been cited as the Studio 54 of Scotland. Past. It was that popular as a nightclub. So I ended up playing there, and through playing there, I then got introduced to another DJ, a guy called Kevin Jones, who was the resident DJ at a place called Lord Tom's, which was on Lothian Road in Edinburgh. And now this was a bar, but had a dance floor. I mean, and when I say a dance floor, I'm talking a postage stamp size dance floor area. You could maybe fit about 20 people on it. But the bar area was quite big. There was two kind of sections, a back area with a dance floor. But it had a DJ booth. Buster Brown's had a big DJ booth that overlooked the dance floor. Lord Tom's had a little cubicle one that you had to go under and get into it. It had glass all the way around it, but it was tiny. Kevin Jones, the resident DJ, was well tuned in musically. He was getting loads of music sent to him. Around this time, I got introduced to mailing lists and stuff like that. I started to get blagging myself onto every mailing list that I could get onto, telling I was DJing 5 nights a week, 700 capacity clubs, and you know, eventually was getting so many records sent in the post. My poster used to be annoyed with me carrying tons of records. So at this point, so 91, so then there was obviously the switch with this kind of there was my mates saying, we're going to this night called Technodrome. And I was like, Technodrome? What? They're like, it's a rave. I was like, doesn't it sound, I'm not be going to that. Rave music? It's techno music. And I was like, nah, that's no for me. I'm going to stick to what I'm doing in the clubs and blah, blah, blah. All my mates went to Technodrome. So Technodrome was in Ayrshire in 1991.
But see, Peter, before that, what are the kind of tracks that you're playing? Are you not seeing dance music sort of infiltrating the club? You know, are you seeing the switch? Obviously, you're seeing it in the charts, and are you still strictly hip hop or?
No, what I found was that there was a bit of a, obviously with the technology changing and music becoming a bit more accessible to people from a production perspective in terms of buying keyboards, drum machines and stuff like that. You were obviously hearing more kind of music. It wasn't guitar and drums, it was drum machine, even in the charts.
Aye.
You know, people, Erasure, the Pet Shop Boys. So you were already getting schooled up to electronic music. Then the dance music was... No, because hip-hop, whilst the electro music in the 80s was electronic sounding, you know, Kraftwerk, as you said, UK version, Art and Noise, you know, people like that. For me, it was more of like... you started to hear a sort of hybrid kind of thing going on where, like, sometimes some people would use a break beat and some people use a 4/4 beat with the break beat. And so you were hearing little bits and pieces, but I was still having to try and play, because I was playing in a commercial venue. Lord Tom's and Buster Brown's were ultimately, I mean, Grant Duff, the resident at Buster Brown's under 18s, and Kevin Jones at Lord Tom's are kind of mentors for me, not just in terms of musical knowledge, but mixing and understanding how to make a dance floor work and read a crowd and change it just like that if need be. I learned so much from them, watching them. And I think a lot of that's been lost over the years, where people just come on and play whatever they want. I still approach it that I've got to come on and make sure that whoever's paid to come in, they have a good time. It's not about me trying to look cool whilst I'll play the music that I like. I know that I still have to adapt it in a certain way to try and get people to like it. So certain styles of music that were coming around back then were like more of a... I started to feel I could get away with playing more hip house kind of stuff, like Fast Eddie, Doug Lazy, Let It Roll's a classic track from that era. Even things like Snap, I've Got the Power. I mean, quite a huge track, breakbeat, quite a heavy breakbeat influenced, infused track that. Yep. But in terms of like hearing kind of like a dance, rave kind of thing, I was hearing bits and bobs. But again, I didn't know they were saying we're going to this Technodrome thing, and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. Or what, do you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm going to still be in this club environment and try and fit what I want. I mean, it started to become less and less of a sort of thought that, there's no hip hop scene in Scotland. There's not. Whilst I went to the concerts, saw Public Enemy a couple of times during the early 90s at the Barrowlands as well. There wasn't really a scene, so I think, well, I'm going to have to adapt to play in this environment. But obviously, Technodrome seemed to be quite a game changer for Scotland in particular. And my mates came back to my house after that in a right state, I must say. Like, absolutely. I think they'd all had their first E's, and they all came back to mine, and they were like, to tell me, they were covered in mud. They were absolutely caked in mud, because Technodrome, that night at Technodrome, and it was meant to be, I think it was quite heavy rain.
I think it was Edinburgh guys that did that, was it no? Technodrome.
Guys from Glasgow.
Was it?
I know. I've been speaking to them because they're talking about maybe trying to make a documentary about it.
It was the other one then. It was Kenny Mason and stuff like that. Earthquaker, that's right.
So they've come back to mine, eyes like fucking saucers, covered in mud.
Spreading the gospel of rave.
They're like, mate, this is something new kind of thing. Again, I hadn't experienced it, so I'm like, must be all right, man. They're saying it's all right. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I then decide, when I lived in Pennycook at the time, there was a place called the Complex, which was a pub, but it had a function room in it. And a guy that I know from Pennycook, a guy called John Edwards, was doing a night. He was doing his own kind of thing. I think it was just, I can't even remember what he was calling it. It was a rave. But I'd already been DJing in the clubs, but he asked me, do you want to come and play at it? I was like, fair enough. Went down. He was using bedroom hi-fi speakers, and for lights, he had nicked 2 road lights, mate. 2 flashing yellow road lights on the table. This is what his setup was, and I was thinking, this is pure amateur, man. I'm in nightclubs.
Techniques in a nightclub, aye.
I'm in the nightclubs and I'm on Technics, and I think he did have Technics, but in the lights and strobes and smoke machine and all that, I'm thinking, I just thought to myself, I'm going to do my own night here. So that was 1991. Just after Technodrome, I contacted the management and said, right, I want to hire the function room. I'm going to put a night on in here. So I was thinking, right, can you come up with a name? So one of the albums that I was listening to at the time, this is, the early 90s, as you know, mega mixes and stuff like that became really popular, and mega mix compilation albums were becoming more of a thing. And there was a series called Mega Bass that came out. And I thought, that's quite a good name for a night. I'm going to call my night Mega Bass. So we ripped off the artwork on the front cover for the album, got my mate to kind of hand draw it, made posters up. I think the posters were hand drawn as well, and got them copied at the local printing shop in Bennycook. £2 a ticket. I had to go and hire a sound system. I had never, obviously, no experience of this at all. I went into Sweet Inspiration in the town and hired a Moonflower, a smoke machine, smoke fluid, and a strobe. And I remember thinking, how am I going to pay? Like the money. I think I borrowed the money to pay for it. I can't remember if you put a down payment on it or you paid for it on the whatever. But anyway, I got the stuff and hired this sound system. And so I put that night on £2. I mean, when you think about it, £2, I should have charged way more than that. But it was totally sold out.
Yep.
Totally rammed the whole place out. So I did a few events of them. So at this point, I was on, as I said, I was on record mailing list, so I was actually getting more tunes. And I was seeing more and more a kind of break. I was thinking, here's the techno stuff. I didn't really like that, but I'm hearing other stuff that's a bit more, in tune with me in terms of using the break beats. It's kind of techno sounds, but there's break beats in here.
Yep.
So this is what I'll play. So that's what I basically kind of started to play. And whilst that was, in those days, it wasn't overly popular from that perspective. But, I do believe, I was educating people. People would say, I can't believe you were playing all that stuff back then. Nobody else was playing anything that was breakbeat and, orientated music and stuff like that. But I wouldn't always play at my nights solely breakbeat orientated tracks. Because of my experience in the nightclub at Buster's and Lord Tom's, I played to the crowd as well. So I would put in things like, Brothers in Rhythm, Such a Good Feeling, stuff like that. And quite commercial, very uplifting, kind of piano orientated stuff. Still a wicked track at the same time. I wouldn't tend to play things that I didn't really like. I just knew that I had to play to the crowd to some degree, because it's not about me. It is about, as DJs, I think it's partly about you, but predominantly about the crowd. You're there to make people dance at the end of the day. You're not there to show that I'm playing all the coolest music and people are like, no idea what you're playing. Do you know what I mean? So from Megabass, I did 3 Megabass events in Pennycook, and on the last one, there was loads of trouble outside between Pennycook and Lonehead, which are 2 rival towns at the time. The management told me, you can't put your event on in here anymore because of the trouble. There was guys got absolutely leathered outside, ambulance. So fortunately,
they obviously weren't on ecstasy.
No. I think this was still like the sort of late teens crowd,
gang culture,
early 20s. Pennycook soccer. It was the PST, Pennycook soccer trendies they were called, and against some I can't remember what Lonehead were called at the time. Anyway, luckily for me, the guy who I borrowed that I'd hired the sound system off contacted me and said, I've had a guy on the phone from Glenrothes who wants to hire a sound system, but he's also asking about DJs, if he know any rave DJs. So I've suggested you, if you want to go and have a meeting with him or whatever. So me and my mates drove through to Glenrothes to a place called Crystal's Arena, which was an ice rink at the time in Glenrothes. It's no longer there. I met this guy called Michael, and he was like, right. So he took us into the ice rink, and it was upstairs. They had a function room. The ice rink was downstairs, which had already had raves on it. I can't remember. I don't know if Street Rave had some of their early raves at Glenrothes.
I think they did. There was an ice rink that they did something. Aye.
Did Kirkcaldy? I know that they did Kirkcaldy ice rink, but I don't know if they did Glenrothes as well. Anyway, so this function room is like quite a big. I was thinking, oh, this is quite good. Had a little stage. Said, right, well, let's do Mega Bass here. We'll do it here. So set up with this guy, this young lad. I can't even remember how long it took us to set that up. Got it going. I ran 2 50-seater coaches from Pennycook to it. It was completely sold out. It was rammed on the first night. On the night so the night had a great success, huge success. You know, everybody loved it. And there was a lot of ease at that night. I then was trying to get everybody paid, but I was introduced to this laddie who had got me through for the meeting, his uncle, who was running the security, and he was like, he tried to palm me off with £100. I'd set it all up, brought all the DJs, sorted the sound system out, and they were paying. I was like, hold on a minute here. No, I've put the DJs, so I've supplied all the night. I mean, this is me 18 years old, into promoting and deal with somebody who's older than me, who's trying to palm me off with £100. I'm like, I'm not having this. I was like, mate, no, this is not how it's going to work. If we're going to be doing things, I'm going to have to pay all the DJs, and I'm getting paid as well. That's my night. Frankie, his name was. He was sound. So anyway, so from that point, got on really well with him. So I decided to change. I just think Mega Bass kind of sounded a bit old hat at that point, thinking it kind of sounds a bit late 80s. It was all a bit pump up the jam, inner city good life kind of time, Mega Bass, beat this, bomb the bass and all that. I was thinking, I need a new name. So I was looking through my record collection, and at this time I'd started to get music sent to me from XL Records. And one of the first tunes that I got sent was the Android EP by The Prodigy. And on the B side of that is a tune called Pandemonium. And I decided I'm going to use that for a name for my night. And that's what I decided to call it. So going forward from one night Mega Bass at Crystal's Arena, we changed it to Mega Bass, and we ran it there for, I think it was just short of 2 years running it at Glenrothes. I mean, and it was really...
As Mega Bass?
No, as Pandemonium.
Pandemonium, right.
And so I did one Mega Bass and then changed it to Pandemonium.
Okay, all right.
And then and that was hugely popular. I mean, and so this was a real sort of cutting my promoting teeth period of time, because I started to deal with agents in London for booking DJs. So we booked DJ Reckless, who was a DMC champion at the time. We had on Eskimos in Egypt, Manix. We had Saffron perform. So Saffron was obviously the singer, the Enjoy singer. She left Enjoy to become Saffron before she then went in to be the lead singer of, is it Republica?
Republica, that's right, yeah.
Dream Frequency played there, and that was through Martin DJ Deviate, who came to Pandemonium. I think he came as a raver one night and introduced himself and played. I think he played, and then he basically became a resident. And Martin, I don't know how he knew Ian Bland, but anyway, we had Dream Frequency, and that was one of the best nights that we had when we had Dream Frequency. That was 1992. We had Dream Frequency, so that was Dream Frequency, really kicking off at that point with
at their peak and all that, with a show, the UV lights and.
Yeah, so that was with Mikey B. Mikey B was the MC for Ian back then, and he had his dancers, Joe and Josephine, 2 dancers, and I think there was a guy called Errol as well. There was another dancer, black guy. A phenomenal show. I mean, you'll know Ian. I mean, he does. He's a well-known producer and made so many classic tracks over the years, but. Pandemonium was hugely successful, and that's where MC Gavsey became a resident as well. And obviously we're going to be performing together. Pandemonium set at 1994, and a week on Saturday.
fuck's sake, it's no long away. And are you looking forward to doing that? Like, I know I've spoke to you about it, and you've got together to just kind of ideas of what you used to do. And
well, I think for me in particular, I mean, I don't do, I have been asked to do old school events over the years, and I've tend to knock them back really, and that's for a variety of reasons. One of the things I look at people's nights and I think, why are they doing it? I mean, ultimately, as a promoter, I always say to people that it's a business. You've got bills to pay. You need to make money if it's your livelihood, and rightly so. You should be able to make money from it. But when I tend to veer away from things if I think they're just solely people who are in it for the money and they're not musically orientated in their background. People like yourself, who I know deep-rooted history in the music industry in Scotland, and but yeah, it's. To be able to do something, in particular in my hometown in Edinburgh. I mean, it's I've not done an old school thing in Edinburgh for a long, long time. Obviously, drum and bass and jungle's been my main musical style that I've been known for in Scotland over the years. But no, definitely really looking forward to it. And Gavsy came up in the studio last week and we were just going through the tunes. One thing that I wanted to kind of speak to Gavsy about, because Gavsy MCs at quite a lot of the old school events in Scotland. And I just wanted to kind of go over some tunes. I don't want to come and perform and kind of play things that maybe really everybody else might play, or things that maybe people might have heard repeatedly at these events. And because it's a Pandemonium set, whilst Pandemonium was commercial in the sense it still was kind of rave orientated, we were a bit more underground musically. And that would be not just through me playing kind of breakbeat stuff, which people used to complain about that to me. People used to say, I remember one time a guy said to me, "Oh, why do you keep playing that speeded up hip hop shit?" That's what he referred to breakbeat as. And funnily, it's funny that how people think about breakbeat stuff like that. Because back then, it's almost like people, I can't dance to it. It's a bit like, there's too much going on. And I say, but it's the same 4/4 beat. It's just because there's more going on. I didn't know which part to dance to. Is it the snare drum? Like this. And it's funny, my partner, a girl that I'd known for years and came onto the scene in 2012, and we were talking on the phone, and she said to me, "Are you still playing that music that sounds like somebody's falling down a flight of stairs?" I think, I just think that's a really good analogy.
Aye, it's like a fucking drummer, one man band falling down the stairs.
You know what I mean? So, but I always try to say to people, I used to say to people in particular, when they come to Manga, the night that I'd obviously, big drum and bass night that I was involved in for 12 years, ultimately broke drum and bass and jungle music in Scotland. I would always say to people, listen, don't knock it till you've tried it. Come to the club. And I know you went to Manga yourself, I know you went metalheads and stuff like that. I know you've got a great affinity with breakbeats, and you obviously got a hip hop and rap music background yourself, so you appreciate and understand those elements. But I would always say to people, come to the night and see what it's like. And every single time I would take people, they would come away going, "That's amazing," because in particular with drum and bass night, drum and bass is so powerful. But you really need to hear it through a sound system to really appreciate it. You can have it on a cassette tape or a CD or whatever, and you might hear it and stuff like that. But until you come to the club and watch a crowd react to the bass lines and
you see the energy,
Yeah, people, if you feed off, you ultimately feed off it, and you think, wow, and people have said, whilst it's not really my thing, I get it. I understand it now. I understand why people like it, especially when there's rewinds and the crowd's going crazy, So, but no, with the 1994, we're definitely going to be touching on probably, there's going to be a lot of tunes that people thinking, I've not heard that one for a long time.
Still doing a bit of digging and pulling out the gems kind of thing.
Definitely. I mean, without going too deep, because I've got all the pandemonium recordings, I can listen back and I think that's going to be a bit too much, a bit too breakbeat, oriented. I mean, back then I would definitely be a bit more kind of ruthless and saying, I'm playing this whether they like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm into, getting it, so they can either like it or not. But whereas now I'm a bit more, right, I've got to make people dance at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And none of us as DJs like to clear the floor at any point. Do you know what I mean?
I think what is equally good about these old school nights is people are a wee bit more well versed in all things old school, and they appreciate it more. It's like, like that time, was it Livingston Forum, when you just had enough and fucking tell the crowd to fuck off kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I thought was fucking amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny one. It's a funny one, that, because
it's probably bittersweet for you kind of thing, you know what I mean? But
it's actually, do you know what? It's funny because somebody came up to me at Manga one night and they said, "Oh, I really loved that you told the crowd to fuck off at that event in Livingston." I was like, "How do you know about that?" He says, "Oh, I read about it in the book, in this book that's come out." I was like, "It's in a book?" He's like, "Aye, do you know about it?" I was like, "Nah." So there's a book came out in the 90s called All Crews Must Big Up by Brian Bell Fortune, and it's basically a book about the history of the sort of predominantly the English side of the rave scene, but more about the hardcore breakbeat jungle roots and stuff like that. And I got in contact with him and I was like, "I heard you've written about me." He said, "Yeah, it's like I heard about this, that you had it really hard, difficult in Scotland, and you played at this event and decided to stop the music and took the mic off the MC and told the crowd to fuck off." I said I did. I said, at the time, it wasn't like, I thought, well, that wasn't a smart move. I had Tom Wilson on the phone the following day going, "What on earth happened last night at the Forum?"
Because Livingston Forum, what are we talking about? A good couple of thousand people. They were big raves, man.
3,000 capacity.
3,000 was it? Aye.
So that night, Hysteria in 1993, I was actually booked to play what I was playing at that time by the promoter, Kenny Cann. But yeah, I remember playing and just being like, I could almost hear the crowd, like a disgruntled sound coming out of the crowd, and being like, oh, like kind of this moaning kind of, and then light sticks, empty cans of beer were sort of just fired across the stage and everything, and the DJ booth was right at the back of the stage, and I've been thinking, what's going on here? But people were looking at me, and Ultrasonic were coming on after me.
Was that right? Was right? Okay, I forgot about that.
Yous were preparing to come on. Yous were at the left side of the stage. The DJ was at the right hand side, and I was just fuck this. Boom! Stopped the record. Just stopped the record. Took the record off. Put the needle on the arm off. Put my record in. Record in the box. Shut my box. Yous are all standing, looking at me across the stage, like, everybody's like, "What the fuck? What's happening?
What's going on here?
What's happening here?" So I've got my record box, just walked over the stage. I went to the MC. I was like, "Come here. He's that. Give me the mic." And I was like, "Fuck off," like that to the crowd. I mean, it wasn't the smartest decision by any means, but I thought, as I said, Tom Wilson phoned me. Funnily enough, sitting in the car park after that night, me and my mate, KMC, another breakbeat DJ of the time, both of us were kind of known as the breakbeat DJs in Scotland at the time. Subsequently, we're in a FUBAR mailing list of DJs not to book. We were sitting in his car in the car park at the Livingston Forum after that, and I remember, because we'd met two girls and we were waiting on them coming outside. Anyway, we're just sitting there, and these two ravers came out, and they were coming past the car, and we were talking about the night, and the boys, cracking night, blah blah blah, and one of the boys goes, "That DJ kid was shit," as he passed the car. And I thought, oh no, man, I've totally ruined my career here. Fucking, do you know what I mean? Anyway, when Tom phoned me, he was like, "Oh, I just felt bad. I thought, I mean, I wasn't really getting an awful lot of work in Scotland at the time anyway, and I thought, I really fucked it up here. I decided, so Club Scene magazine put out a letter in the letters page, or a statement about it. They had a real go at me, and then I decided to put in a personal apology in Club Scene magazine for that.
Can't remember that, man.
But I've still got copies of it.
Right.
And then over the years, people have come up to me all over the place. Even in England, they've said, "Oh, I love that you told the crowd to fuck off at that event because you were playing breakbeat and they were all fucking moaning and stuff like that." It's kind of a bit, a bit of sort of notoriety in that sense, But at the time, I was like, "Oh no, this was a big mistake, man."
It wasn't a planned thing, but what I liked about it is rave scene for me was all about the togetherness, about all music, not just one sort of style. And this was kind of like you playing whatever you were into, and folk just weren't embracing it, and it should have been about embracing the night. And for me, it was just like a good sort of punk rock attitude of fuck off, man. You're just not getting it. And I think probably a lot of people in the crowd probably never got it until a good few years later. And then they probably went, "Oh, right." Because I think one of my pet hates with the scene was it get really pigeonholed. And for this, having a bit of everything, it just went to separate rooms, and then folk just was into hardcore, or that was it, or Gabba, or house, or techno. It just wasn't. It wasn't everybody together anymore.
Oh, no, definitely. That would get very, very much segregated, and because, I mean, when you look at events like Resurrection and stuff like that, in particular in those early '90s events, they would have on Jumping Jack Frost, Fabio and Groove, right?
Brilliant, right across the board, man.
Ricky Finn, do you know what I mean? So they were. And now, don't get me wrong. Those DJs again, very, very much well versed in the crowd pleasing perspective. They wouldn't come here and necessarily really play something like a full set they would play in London. I mean, I played over in Belfast with Jumpin' Jack Frost, and you would never have thought it was Jumpin' Jack Frost playing, because he was playing in Belfast. In Belfast, you couldn't go and play what they would record. They referred to it as broken beats. That's what they called it over there. If you paid break beats, they go, "You're not going to be playing into that pishy broken beat stuff here."
Mm-hmm.
So it was very much techno 4/4 or whatever. So you adapted to a crowd, but I definitely feel that Scotland could have been. I blame the promoters for this. I blame certain promoters, in particular Resurrection. I had a bit of a beef with them. They never ever booked me until I played live on Radio 1. When I played live on Radio 1, One in the Jungle, they were on the phone the following week.
Yep.
Book me. And I said, "Where have you been for all the other years that I played?" And because they'd pissed me off that much, I double booked myself and didn't bother playing for them. I played for World Dance doing it at the airport. I was like, "No, I'm not just going to come now.
Jump to their tune.
Just because I've played live on Radio 1, you know what I mean? Which was a huge thing, to play on One in the Jungle on Radio 1, which was the flagship jungle show on national radio.
Yeah.
That was massive. But I was like, nah, I'm playing at World Dance at Lyd Airport in Kent, mate, in front of 10,000 people. I'm not playing at Resurrection. And they weren't even that pissed off that they booked me again. I said, I'm playing down south. And I actually played for them just before they finished up. But I would really have liked to have played more, at Resurrection. But the avenue, the way that they went musically, I don't know who was, like you said, there was a period of time where you could get like a lineup of mixed styles, on a night, and Resurrection just became like, especially when it's like the Gabba techno.
Musically, it just went doing a harder, faster thing instead of having like diverse lineups like fucking Laurent Garnier to Lenny D in one night, and then they just stuck on that hard thing, and it basically fitted away. And I think that summed up Scotland's rave scene in general. And probably, I don't know, mate. I think you've probably made a lot of harsh decisions, but I think I'd like to think, looking back, they were probably the right decisions. because
for me,
for you, aye, because. I mean, look, I had no cross paths with you in a while, and I think we met each other in 23rd Precinct, and you told me about Manga, and I was like, fuck, is that your night? And then I come through to a few of them, and you were fucking wrecking it with them, man, because for my fix for a bit of fucking that kind of action, I was going down to the Blue Note, because I actually wasn't aware there was fuck all happening up this neck of the woods. So it was great to fucking hear it and see it happening, and and also, like, I don't know, see a Scottish guy fucking leading the charge kind of thing, and something that was, I don't know, almost fucking not frowned upon, but there just didn't seem to be a scene here, and you were fucking creating it out of necessity kind of thing.
Even getting club nights, it used to be really difficult. Even in the so prior to Manga, I was involved in other nights in Edinburgh. One night in particular called Street Knowledge, which I used to run with KMC. We did that at the venue, and we brought Ronnie Size to Scotland in 1995, and Ronnie Size was nobody. Mm-hmm. We knew about him because we were fully into the jungle scene at that time, and KMC was more of into the what used to be regarded as the intelligent drum and bass side of things, which was LTJ Bookham and more of a melodic drum and bass, sort of jungle drum and bass style. Whereas I was into the hardcore breakbeat sounds, all the raga samples and all the hip hop stuff. But we couldn't get venues to give us dates. We would contact clubs and they'd be like, "You're not putting that on in here," and we could only get clubs Sunday nights and maybe a Thursday. I did another night called Jungle Park at 9C, which is now the Liquid Room, the music box it used to be called. And I had DJ Ron playing at that, Daisy and Jake's from Bristol. Did a couple of nights. But again, not having the ability to put on a Friday and Saturday, which was predominantly taken up by more of the commercial house and techno and stuff like that. And Scotland is, it's funny, Glasgow, for me, like when we did running Manga in Edinburgh, we decided to branch out and start doing Glasgow. Now, Glasgow, I've always viewed Glasgow from a musical perspective kind of ahead of Edinburgh in so many ways. Through its talent, obviously people like the Slam guys, in particular. I mean, they have put that big event on at Ingliston Slam 3D. I remember going to that. But they just seem to take things a bit more seriously in Glasgow. But Glasgow, like Edinburgh, to some degree, didn't take to the breakbeat elements of music. Now, I have to say, Mark Smith and Notorious Vinyl, he definitely had the ability to, I think, school people into the sound a little bit with what he was doing. I really liked what Mark was doing. I mean, he's a hugely talented DJ as well. He'd do good scratching and stuff like that. And so there might have been a time where it potentially could have been possible, but Mark wasn't really fully into that scene. So there wasn't really anybody other than KMC, who was from Hamilton. I don't think there was really anybody
championing that sound.
No, not on the West Coast. So anyway, so when Manga got going in 1996, and by the late 90s, early 2000s, we decided to branch out to Glasgow and do the Sub Club, which is a great venue.
Legendary venue, man.
We end up doing loads of nights in Glasgow. We really had it going in Glasgow at one point. We were doing the Sub Club, the Art School, the Renfrew Ferry. We used to have so many good nights on the Renfrew Ferry.
That was an amazing venue, wasn't it?
It was like so unique to have that on the wee boat on the Clyde like that. But there did become a bit of a scene. There was a night at the art school called Live Evil. There was a guy called Paul Reset who then became known as the kind of person for what was now called drum and bass. The jungle term had kind of died away, and it was now drum and bass music. And they were doing a night at the art school him and a female DJ called Tanya Swift, a South African girl. So they were doing that. We were doing manga, but then I got a bi-weekly show on Beat 106. When Beat 106 started, we got a drum and bass show every Sunday, 11 till 1 on a Sunday night. Now, that was quite big. I thought that was really good for Scotland. I thought, right, this is an opportunity for more people to hear it, because I think, as I said earlier on about people not having the opportunity to hear it properly and come to the club and listen to it, it's very difficult for them to understand the music in so many different ways. But there was a time in 2000 where things were really good. Edinburgh had lots. Edinburgh's ultimately always been the hub for drum and bass and jungle. There's no doubt about it, and that's through predominantly through manga. Following manga, we've got obviously my other night, Jungle Magic. There was another night called Explicit, and you've had various nights over the years that have kind of carried the flag for drum and bass music forward. But Edinburgh has the added advantage of having English students.
Right, okay.
Not does, but Edinburgh University, Queen Margaret University, are huge. They've got a huge influx of English students that come here. Without the English students being in Edinburgh, I don't think it would have been as easy to put Edinburgh on the map and put Scotland on the map for a jungle and drum and bass perspective.
Do you know what? I've never actually thought about that angle, and now that you say that, it makes so much sense. It's fucking joined the dots for me. Because for me, in the early 90s as well, I always felt, bizarrely, I felt musically Edinburgh was ahead of Glasgow. Isn't that mad how I thought that, and you kind of thought Glasgow had the edge?
I would say more so. Glasgow's probably would always have the edge in terms of production.
Uh-huh.
There seems to have always been more people through the West Coast. Look, you've got yourself. And when I say the West, they're not predominantly just Glasgow. Look, you've got yourself, Scott Brown, Cumbernauld. All these rave bands over the years that have been around. They're predominantly all from the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
All of them, nearly. They're not really from. I'm talking about in the 90s rave bands. What bands were from Edinburgh? Not really any of them.
I've got to say, Finny tried Mr. Eggy Bumyazi.
Egg Bumyazi, from the doing acid sort of style stuff. Do you know what I mean? But whatever it is, Glasgow. What's that old saying that they used to have? Glasgow's, is it smiles better? They used to have that big yellow Mr. Man thing, their advertising thing. But I've just always felt Glasgow's had the kind of edge with the production side of things, and a bit more. Edinburgh's really, really difficult. They say out of all the cities to promote in Scotland to make things work, Edinburgh's the hardest place to make things work. It's very cutthroat here, and this. I was going to say to you earlier on that what I've found over the years, for some reason, now don't get me wrong, I've made mistakes over the years in terms of my attitude towards people, how I speak to people, how I deal with people, things I've done. But for some reason, down south, I've never really had any problems with people down south. I've always had a great affinity and a great love. We've got a great mutual respect for the music. And up here, it's always almost like, oh, he's making it. How is he making it? How is he successful? People didn't appreciate and understand how much work goes into getting to where we are at 50-year-old and to be still actively involved in the music industry. Now, I took a period of time out of the music industry, but I knew I was going to get back into it. But to still be actively involved and be doing stuff and be looking to be creative, even more so nowadays due to the pressures that are on you in terms of social media, how you promote your events. There's so much. It's not just as like putting a flyer out these days, like the olden days. Mm-hmm. People came to your night, whether you put flyers. Like manga in particular. Manga got such a good reputation that I could have put my granny on, mate, and people would have come and saw her play. Mm-hmm. It was that.
No, because they were coming for the event.
Aye, no, people would say like, "Oh, who are these people that are playing? We didn't ken we're gone because Manga's
A brilliant night.
It's such a great night. It's rammed. We'd sell out in advance all the time for long periods, for years, you know. So, but I just don't get what it is about Scotland in particular. I don't want to say it's just Edinburgh because I can't speak for Glasgow in terms of the musical community, but the people that I do know from Glasgow always seem to be more supportive of each other. Edinburgh just has this negative, like, why are they doing that? How are they doing this? How is he successful at that? I'm better than them, you know, and even more so now, I've got more followers than them, so I should. Yeah. It's almost like I deserve to be getting somewhere, even though I'm not doing the graft to get anywhere.
I think that's just a Scottish mentality. I think it's that fucking tribal clan mentality where somebody does all right, and then I don't know if it's jealousy. There's got to be a bit of jealousy in there that you just want to tear it down and rather than support it. And I think that's one. And I think that's Scotland wide. I mean, there is support and there is people who are working together and stuff like that. But there's just always been that fucking people hate to see other people do well. Whereas I get what you're saying, and I don't know, rose-tinted glasses, I would go, England seem to have a fucking scene and they're all working together. But then when I speak to English artists, you hear the same pattern, man. Everybody wants to one-up somebody else.
Yeah, I think...
Is it just fucking humans in general? We just want to fucking outdo the next guy?
Maybe, and it's something that over the years that it took me, like, getting the more I got involved in music and the more I came up against this kind of stuff, I didn't really know how to navigate it, really.
Fucking wears you down, man, doesn't it?
It's like, you know, who says, you know, obviously pre-internet days, I mean, when you got somebody saying anything about you, what would you hear? Oh, so-and-so says you're a dickhead. Like, all right. You know, nowadays you're like, I really struggled in the early days of the internet with the forums and stuff like that. I used to getting slagged off for...
The forums were fucking hardcore back in the day, weren't they? When you actually think about some of the shit, it was because that was genuine, faceless. It was just some cunt put a fucking name up, and then they were like the keyboard warriors and stuff.
Aye, mate, I've been going out to murder people, mate.
Aye.
Like, I'm going, who the fuck is this?
Aye.
This about me? What are they talking about? Like, you know, and I was like very much back then, like, really, like, you know, I'm a junglist, didn't fuck with me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to come fucking see you. And I would go and see people, like, especially, like you said, the keyboard gangster warrior, you know, ultimately sitting in their underpants in their attics.
And if you did find out to speak to them, 9 times out of 10, they would shit themselves.
Oh, I've been in the situation.
Backpedal and tell you all sorts of fucking pish to get out of it.
I've been there, mate, and people say, no, it's only a laugh. We're only having a laugh. It doesn't look like it's a laugh to me, mate. But one of the mistakes that I made, and it's something that I learned over the years to not do, is to not engage with it in the sense that if somebody's got anything to say, it's funnily talking about Public Enemy. There's a documentary called Prophets of Rage. It's a Public Enemy documentary. It's a really good. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's really, really good. So there's a point in it where Flavor Flav and Professor Griff are talking about a feud that they were having whilst on tour. Now, Flavor Flav has been